Hello and welcome to Orange Wave, the pro-NDP podcast looking to combat the lies of the right-wing establishment media. I am your host, Will Adams, and today we're going to be talking about the by-election results that happened across the country just little over a week ago. On June 19th, 2023, the ridings of Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount, Quebec, Oxford, Ontario, Winnipeg, South Centre, Manitoba, and Portrage, Lisgar, Manitoba had federal by-elections as the MPs in each respective area resigned, with the exception of the seat in Winnipeg, which was the result of the unfortunate passing of the currently sitting MP. Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount, Quebec was won by the Liberals, Oxford, Ontario was won by the Conservatives, and Winnipeg, South Centre, Manitoba was won by the Liberal Party. So there was no seat flipping, as people expected. However, if you've listened to this podcast in the past and episodes I have made, you'd know that the only riding I was interested in was the one happening in Portrage, Lisgar. Portrage, Lisgar is what we would call a true blue riding, one that is conservative. It's also the same riding that kept former interim Conservative Party leader Candice Bergen in power in the region for several years. She was around since Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, and she spent the latter end of her career criticizing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for things that she let Stephen Harper get away with for many years when he was Prime Minister. She voted against banning child abuse on LGBT youth and supported a divisive protest, but not out of principle, but rather to destroy both Erin O'Toole and Justin Trudeau's careers. After 18 to 20 years as an MP, she's decided to retire and continue what she's been doing all this time, living on taxpayer dollars while doing nothing beneficial for the country. The only difference now is the fact that she is not in the public light anymore. The by-election in Portrage, Lisgar got people across Canada talking as PPC Leader Maxime Bernier was running in the region. I myself was very curious as to how it turned out, so I followed it very closely. I was making predictions about what would happen and initially thought that it was going to be a close election. I thought that it would be neck and neck between the Conservative and People's Party, and I thought one party would just barely win over the other. However, I turned out to be very wrong in that regard, as the new Conservative MP, Brandon Leslie, not only won the by-election, but won in a landslide, with him getting 64% of the vote, where Maxime only got 17%. Now, not too long from now, we will be getting into the semantics of how this is a complete embarrassment for the People's Party of Canada, but we need to understand, first off, that this result in the election actually makes a ton of sense in retrospect. And to understand why Maxime Bernier lost so hard in Portrage, Lisgar, we need to understand the key factors as to why Brandon Leslie won, despite the fact that Maxime is already established and has been around for a considerably longer time than Brandon has. And spoiler alert, it is not election interference the way the PPC crowd has been claiming it to be.
I was born and raised on a family farm just south of Portage. I've seen things start to change, and not for the better. People are worried that the Canadian dream won't be possible for their children.
Has invoked the Emergencies Act.
And who can blame them? All we see is higher taxes, woke liberals, and less freedom. Justin Trudeau is trying to ban, outlaw, and marginalize our rural way of
There
life.
are some guns that we're going to have to take away from people who were using them.
I've had enough. My name is Brandon Leslie, and I'm running to be your next Conservative candidate in the riding of Portage, Lisgar. I'm a farm kid from Portage that went to work in Ottawa to learn how that city works, but I never forgot where my home is. And I know that our community deserves a strong voice from our community representing them in Parliament. I hope I can count on your support in this nomination race so that together we can send the right Conservative to Ottawa.
From an objective lens, that was a pretty good political advertisement for someone who was not established in Portrage, Lisgar before. Brandon Leslie makes his connection to Portrage known, that he grew up there, that he, above all else, is going to fight based on the rural way of life that the people of Portrage de Lisgar have. Now, he did tap into the whole anti-woke ideologue a little bit, but he was mainly focusing on rural values, and it makes sense for the type of region that Portrage de Lisgar is. That's how you run a campaign right. You need to know who the audience is. Now, if Maxime Bernier made an ad very similar to that and just called it a day, but added a bit of PPC flavoring to it, then it would have been completely fun. He would have had a better chance. But instead of running off of the issues that Portrage de Lisgar cared about and being in touch with the rural area that Portrage is, he instead decided to run off of many of his baseless conspiracy theories.
Our economy is the state of our culture. We are living in a highly immoral times. Everywhere you look, you see examples of moral and cultural degeneracy. Radical cultural Marxists have seized control over our educational system, the mainstream media, and governments. They push a program of anti-life, anti-family, and anti-Canadian values. Gender ideology and the trans movement are promoting the confusion and mutilation of our children. It is very sad what is happening in our country. It's useless to debate with these extremists. There is no common ground. 10 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to indoctrinate 7- and 8-year-olds and force sexuality upon them. What about the Conservative Party? What about our supposed to be Conservative Party? The so-called Conservative Party has conserved nothing since its inception in 2003, after the merger of the Canadian Alliance, with the Progressive Conservative Party. Do you want a strong voice for families or another fake conservative who will say one thing when he's here in Manitoba, but be silent when he returns to Ottawa? Do you want a member of parliament who respects and fight for family values, or another so-called conservative who takes your vote for granted?
I hope it's apparent to even PPC supporters that the People's Party of Canada needs a leadership review. Maxime Bernier has just lost way too many times, and they're about due at this point. Let's discuss why this particular campaign was such a big problem. First off, this was an election in a small town, not for the entire country. In an election of this tiny of a scale, the town is interested in what you can do for them. People in Portrage cared about taxes and guns, and that's about it. They're a rural community. And where Brandon was a lot less divisive in his campaign and only focused on those issues that people in said rural town cared about, Maxime decided to just start talking about how the trans community wanting equal rights is bad, and about how Brandon Leslie, a well-respected man, was a quote-unquote fake conservative. This put a bad taste in not only the mouths of the people in Portrage, but it even put a bad taste in the mouths of the right-wing establishment media themselves. This comes from Canada Proud. In the 2017 Conservative leadership election, Bernier lost to Andrew Scheer. Despite initially pledging to work with him, Bernier decided to start his own personal grift vehicle, and the PPC was born. 2 years later, after forming the PPC, Bernier lost his own seat to Richard Lehoux, a dairy farmer, after holding the seat for 13 years. Bernier's father had also previously held the seat for 13 years. The next year, Bernier tried to run in York Centre, a riding in Toronto he had no connection to. He lost with less than 4% of the vote. In the 2021 election, Bernier made an attempt to win back his riding. He lost by a significantly larger margin than in 2019 and barely beat out the Bloc Québécois in the riding. In 2023, Bernier set his eyes on Portrage de Lisgar, one of the most conservative ridings in Canada. He lost to Brandon Leslie with less than 18% of the vote, a lower margin for the PPC the riding than in 2021. All this tells me is that Maxime Bernier is just a pathetic grifter. Come on, if Max even had a shred of integrity and he truly does believe in his mission, he would probably resign. And the fact that he hasn't done that and he keeps running in areas that he doesn't have a connection to is a big problem. And I was talking to a Conservative Party intern, my friend Aiden, and I asked him what his thoughts on it were, and this was what he had to say, and I couldn't agree more.
Aiden Mackey, me boy.
Here today.
Good for you.
You hear what happened in Portrage?
Yes, I did actually. I was very excited to hear about it this morning.
I gotta record an episode on that, but what are your thoughts on it? Who is Brandon Leslie, and why did the overwhelming majority of Portrage reject Maxime?
I don't think they like. Okay, I'll phrase it this way. How would Quebec feel if Brandon Leslie came parachuting into post?
So it's
It would go well.
So it's the exact reason I thought it was, because Maxime doesn't have connections.
Yes, yeah.
The overwhelming majority of people who vote for the Conservative Party of Canada aren't the type of extremist that Maxime is. Even if they agree with some, if not all, of what he has to say, it's not like a hill to die on kind of thing. And it certainly doesn't help that Maxime Bernier doesn't actually make his beliefs seem, palatable. He doesn't seem approachable the way other party leaders do. Most conservatives just want what they perceive as a tax cut. They want a reduction in violence. They want their perception of gun rights in the country. None of the noise that Maxime Bernier pushes matters to even the majority of Canadians in general. It's why the PPC can't break 2%. Instead of trying to maybe evaluate and change his game plan, Maxime is going to keep screaming globalism and keep talking about Agenda 2030, and he's not going to be able to break 2% of the vote ever. And although he makes a lot in donations, he's not a legitimate candidate. It's kind of like Chris Guy. He doesn't believe in democracy. He's not a viable candidate. You shouldn't be voting for him. If you support the PPC's values in and of itself, then you should really be pushing for the party to do a leadership review. Maxime Bernier is bad merchandise, and I think the PPC really needs to get serious with this and decide if they want a grifter leading or if they want a real leader leading. Unlike a man like Andrew Scheer, I can criticize Maxime Bernier and not be a hypocrite because I'm critical of both parties. It's what's destroyed Bernier's career, and it's what's ultimately going to destroy Poilievre's career. Canadians aren't buying it. Canadians understand one thing, that they deserve better than this. Canadians do not deserve to be lied to and gaslit and be indoctrinated by these MAGA-style politics, and I am certain that the overwhelming majority of Canadians will make these men pay with their votes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Orange Wave. I am your host, Will Adams. I hope you have an amazing day, and remember, Jagmeet Singh loves you.